And we're back. I think this is our first two-part live at 11:05. We lost the signal. Josh went into the booth, and I guess we didn't have the signal. So I forget where I left off or where we lost us, but you have no idea where you lost it.
No.
This may be a repeat, but we'll do it again. We fit this up. This is the rear panel. It's off of a sedan, our sedan. It really didn't fit the coupe. We've got it modified to fit a license plate. What we had to do is cut the ends off, fit it to the fenders while it was on the car. You can see in here, there's hardly no difference. You can't tell that this was cut off and remade. You can do that with fiberglass, kind of like metal. You would weld it and cut or grind the weld and not see it, but this one, you just put more fiberglass onto it. It's the right thickness. It's a little bit thicker up in here, but not too bad. We fit it to the body, or to the fender. You can see it fits up in there. The holes are already put in. The reason that has primer on it already, we went ahead and did our body work on that, made sure it all fit, sanded it, put some primer on it. So now I've got my fenders. To get the fenders out of a mold, the mold has to be waxed. The mold is made, gel coat is a very hard tooling gel, polyester product. The gel coat on your fender, same thing, although there's a sandable gel that's not so hard. They make different hardnesses, but it's a polyester product. If you put those two together, they would stick and not come apart if there wasn't some kind of a mold release or wax. So there's wax on the mold, and some of that wax comes off onto the part. So before you start anything, I'll take a wax and grease remover. This one's just a generic brand wax and grease remover. It doesn't really cut paint or anything like that. It just loosens wax and moves it. And it works much better on wax than it does on dirt. So what I usually do, I'll take a little bit of water. I'll wet my rag with water. Then I'll take a little bit of wax and grease remover. Kind of get them blended on the rag. I'll just wipe the entire fender before I even start anything. And now, it's important that you wipe it off, otherwise whatever wax that you just loosened up and it's going to stay on there. So after you get it wet, take a dry, clean rag, wipe it off. So hopefully there's no wax or contaminants on there. What I'm going to do now, there's a couple ways you can do this. You don't necessarily have to prime the entire car or the entire part. You could just prime the areas that need it, sand the entire thing, seal it, and then paint it. But I like to go ahead and prime this entire part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sand it. I got a couple different grits of sandpaper. I'll have an 80 grit. And it's pretty coarse. If you're at all familiar, I use it on a DA. A DA works really, really well on rounded parts, and you can actually put something pretty straight too, if you know how to handle it. But on a rounded part, it works well. DA stands for dual action. It's not a grinder. It doesn't just go around, but it also oscillates. So as it's spinning, it goes back and forth, and it doesn't make grinding scratches so much. It makes little swirl marks. So I'll start with like 80, get my body work down to 80. Then, again, if you're familiar with sandpapers, I take a 180 and get it sanded to 180 and make sure that's the deepest scratch that I have. And then I'll probably hit it real quick with 220 before I prime it. But I will prime the entire part. And that way, I don't have and we use a polyester primer. It's an activated primer. It's the best, pretty much what you can get. What could happen, if I sand through here, it all feels smooth. There's going to be an edge here. And chemically, it may show that edge. It probably won't, but it's potentially it can. I just like to work it all in that primer. I can block it, I can sand it, I can get it down to say 400, then 600. I'll seal it, and then it's ready to paint. more time you spend straightening it apart, the more time you spend in your prep time, the better your paint's gonna be. I mean, that's just the way it is. You can't rush through it. You've got to stay focused, stay in one end, sand it all, don't sand randomly, and leave shiny spots. That's one way to tell if it's sanded well. There's no shiny spots. It's all got that dull satin finish from whatever grit sandpaper you got. So we're good there, and when we build a car, and when I say we, I'm not talking we Spirit Cars here, but when we, all of us, there's kind of a purpose for it. We don't want to just be, make a big splash. We want to do it bigly. I mean, when I say bigly, we show up at a car show, we want people to not just know that we did something and we did it in a big way. We did it in a big way and we want to show it off. So bigly is doing it in a big way and showing it off, because look what we did and look what we can do. Because, you know, we are America, and when America's great, look at us. Because we can be proud of what we do, and the same in a car and whatever. I think I used it in the proper context. So hopefully this helps you. When you get your fiberglass parts, different companies have different quality. It doesn't work like metal, but it does work easy. You can see we cut and made pieces, and you wouldn't even be able to tell unless I told you that we cut it and made a new piece there. A little Bondo here and there, some primer. Just don't fill too big of scratches with your primer. It will shrink. I'll finish with this. I don't know how many people even know from the old lacquer days. I was thinking about, I've been doing this for 40 years now, which is a long time, so that's a lot of bigly going on. I've been bigly in Detroit, I've been bigly in Flippin', and we want to be bigly everywhere. So everything we do, we want to do good, but we want it to last for a long time, not just make that first splash and be done. So the old lacquer, I've had it compared to a dirt road. Dirt road, it gets dry, it gets hard going down the dirt road. But when it rains, it gets muddy and it gets ruts and holes. Old lacquer, if I took lacquer thinner and wiped that car, it doesn't matter if it's a 100-year-old paint job, it will wet it again and it will make it soft. Now, the modern urethane paints, polyurethane paints, activated paints is more like concrete. But once you put the water and activate that concrete, it's a chemical reaction and it bonds. And it doesn't matter if it rains or not, it might get wet, but it won't soften the whole thing. So we have product nowadays that once it hardens, once it cures, you can probably wipe it with thinner or whatever. I wouldn't just recommend wiping your car with thinner, but you won't eat down into the paint. You may eat onto the finish a little bit. You don't want to fill a gap, an 80 grit scratch, because what will happen as that material, as it acts and reacts, it shrinks a little bit. And you've got a 90% cure time within, like 3 months, but it takes a long time and it takes a certain amount of heat to ultimately cure this out and have it 100% cure rate, because reducers continue to evaporate out of the product and as it cures. So before you prime, get it sanded pretty well. 180, 220, at least there. I wouldn't prime for sure 80 scratches or anything like that. It's just not the way to do it. So that's it for today. We're a two-parter. So hopefully you didn't miss, or I didn't leave too much out in between. We've kind of been holding on to these, waiting to show you from nothing. So I'm just going to go ahead and sand through all this, get it primered. We may show you the wet sanding process and painting the process tomorrow or next day. So what do you think? Pass it on? Coffee break?
Pass it on.
Pass it on. Buddy of mine, the Hot Rod Man, Ernie Gilcrease, wrote a couple books. These are quick little sayings that he's got. So I randomly finished out by just reading one. And this one is pretty good. Looks like your face won't crack if you crack a smile. It might make you feel good enough to crack a joke and make others crack up. What are you waiting for? Get cracking. Okay, so I want you to get cracking in a bigly way. And give us some comments. How can you use bigly in a comment? I want to see it, and I want it used correctly. Have a good day.